Hello and most welcome to a little conceptual summary of the book What is Real by Adam Becker. And I will also make it a little bit more interesting. I'll put a certain twist to it. I would like to compare it to three other authors, the ideology of the book, if you like. And those authors are James Gibson and the not so very well-known Edward de Bono, the constructor of lateral thinking, the master of creativity from the mystical island of Malta. So I would start a little bit with the point of Adam Becker, and I think you viewers who have been faithful will notice there is a little bit of a discrepancy against the ordinary ideology of this YouTube channel, and it's that it does actually take a very huge criticism against the Copenhagen interpretation. But I was thinking in a Derridian sense, to see the antipode of one's own thinking can also be very helpful. And at least I think it's very healthy. So let's do this and dwell firstly, what does this Adam Becker says? Well, it's almost like he discovers that there is a conspiracy within the quantum mechanical ideology from its very sort of birth in the 30s. His attack group is, of course, the Copenhagen interpretation with Niels Bohr, Heisenberg and Schrödinger et al. But it's also this, how could you put this? He claims that it was too large of a hegemony of Niels Bohr. As we all know, Niels Bohr was a very extroverted and winning personality. And his influence was huge, and Becker is hinting to maybe his influence was a bit too big. So what is he aiming at? Well, this is this very phrase, shut up and calculate, the forgetfulness of what does quantum theory imply? I'll just shortly, briefly tell you what we have. We have the best proven theory ever in humankind. It is actually so proven, it is doubtful that all of a sudden a new theory would evolve. It's incredibly unlikely. It's more proven than all the theories we had in the past times 1,000. That is no exaggeration, no hyperbole from my case. No, not at all. The second thing is, as I always mention, it is unknown even to researchers and scientists. We are now standing at the restaurant, the lovely restaurant at university, especially in academia, it's not known about quantum mechanics. And that's a shame. This is a view I share with Becker, because if you don't know the foundations of reality, all the knowledge you build on top will be wrong. And that makes, well, quantum mechanics pretty important. It's a not so very known figure. I think maybe some of you listeners and viewers have heard about David Bohm. I'm not saying Bohr now, I am saying Bohm and the pilot wave. The reason Becker takes him up is because Bohm has a contrary opinion towards the Copenhagen interpretation. This is called the pilot wave theory, originally proposed by Louis de Broglie. And he suggested that in contrast to what quantum mechanics says, particles do have a definite position all the time. They aren't in a cloud of probability, rather they are actual beings, so to speak, being pushed around around by an invisible pilot wave. Let's do the wave. This theory is deterministic, in contrast to what we usually say. I did tell you it's going to be a surprise here. And removes the need for a conscious observer to collapse anything. And Becker also highlights the tragedy of Bohm's life. He's suggesting that I think the ones who are familiar with David Bohm, also familiar that he was accused of being a communist spy during the McCarthy era and such. He says that could have contributed. There's a third antagonist to the Copenhagen interpretation. I would actually like to ask Kalle here if he knows what the third could be. Take a gander, I guess.
Heisenberg.
No, it is actually Hugh Everett, which you mentioned. We even read his biography.
I read his biography.
Yes. He is also a contestant to the Copenhagen interpretation. And I think maybe the point of the whole theory or the ideology and the zest of the book now becomes clear. He really wants to pinpoint towards the weirdness. What could be weirder than Hugh Everett's and in many world interpretation? Here he is also removing the collapse, just like David Bohm. But he says, for every conscious choice, a new world evolves. So if in my present state I decide to go right, that will turn out into one world with its most definite own history. But if I were to take a step to the left, another world would have evolved. The reason for bringing this up is to really sharpen the idea of why quantum mechanics is so utterly weird. Because the many worlds idea is actually less weird one than the ideas that Bohr, Heisenberg, Schrödinger and Pauli are suggesting. It's actually less weird. Can you imagine? I like to see it this way. The future is open because for every choice you make, which is deterministic because there is no collapse, there is no probability way, but we instead have changed the whole schedule so we have an infinite many worlds around us. And that is a sort of other kind of indeterminism because the amount of worlds are indefinite. We previously made an interview with the Gothenburgian physicist Allan Emreen. He shows it more in the league of the Copenhagen interpretation, as I take it. And that is, at the very instant when the collapse happens, all the other probabilities disappeared, like they've never been there. And what is left is one deterministic causal way to the present. I have my past, I have my present, and I have my future. But all the other varieties disappeared. That is not less weird than many worlds. Actually, think about it, there are similarities. Why? Well, the thing is, in the first example with the many worlds, I will never ever be able to visit any of the other worlds. And no one else will. So we can never see any trace of them. We cannot see any causality. So there are similarities. It's a matter of, I like this geographical toponomical word, projection. It's depending how you project. Do you want to see it from the inside, from my view, or from a half outside view, as in the many world example? So see here, they are not entirely different. And it was actually helpful when I prepared for this little mini lecture here has also trained my voice to become a bit more progressive and booming. It helped me to understand the very extent of what Alan Emreen earlier told me, and also what Sir Roger Penrose and Carlo Rovelli proposes. It was actually helpful to see the opposite side, although there are so many problems with the aversion ideas. Poor Everett were also sharing the same destiny as poor old David Bohm. He was laughed out, and he actually quitted physics after being laughed out. I think he went to drum instead because he was a famed jazz drummer as well. So poor guy. What happens later? Well, we get a proof with John Bell and the end of locality. John Stuart Bell, an Ulster man. Well, I wouldn't say he's an Ulster man. He is from Northern Ireland. I don't know if he's an Ulster man. I take that back. He could be an Ulster man. He could be a Protestant. But anyway, he's from Ulster, Northern Ireland, and what John Bell proves is that there is no such thing as a local universe or a local place. Everything is global. And what does that mean? Well, no matter which of these three theories I just mentioned, either the Copenhagen interpretation, David Bohm, or Hugh Everett, or today we often hear the name Max Tegmark, actually half Swedish guy. They all submit to non-local behavior. So there we see that the original presumptions they had in quantum mechanics were actually right, dead right. The world is non-local. Everything is entangled. So the perspective that is taken here at the university, where you take everything from its context, you take yourself out of the context, you as an observer, you take your history out of the concept. Most grave, you take yourself out of the picture. There is no personality. We think of objectivity as not having a personality. There's nothing social with it. And this we will see when we strive into James Gibson. We are dead wrong. Reality, an objective reality, is a global reality. And in the take of James Gibson, that reality is the lived togetherness with other people. There cannot be an observer-dependent reality without all the people and the language game that we are using. There is always a purpose for the things we are using. And now we find a rather nice parallel in between James Gibson and this sort of ideology that Adam Becker is pointing to. And what is this? Well, affordances, that's the fave word for James Gibson, and now very popular within neurology and cognitive psychology. You could see the different, in the Hugh Everettian view, you can see the different life worlds as affordances. What afford me the best? To take a step to the right or a step to the left? Well, to the left, I can have a nice view over the sunny library to my left. To the right, I can see the mountain and a bit of bush. Although it's clouded, I think I prefer the sunny side. So I go to the left, thereby, and it affords me better to have a look at the sunny place. It makes me happier, more sunny. That is an affordance. That is, in a way, non-deterministic. Yes, I knew the Everettian view and the Bohmian view both are deterministic. But you have to think there are either an endless amount of life worlds or there's an endless amount of pilot waves. So you still have this voluntary action. And thereby, in a way, if you include the observer with the environment and all other people, you have a free will. Isn't that gallant? Free will is deeply connected to what we want. I will jump forward and take a sip on my coffee here because I wanted it. Actually, just when I described this, I was discovering my own will. I don't think I would grab this coffee cup if I hadn't had this lecture right now, because it reminded me of the free choice, of the affordance. My mouth is a bit dry. Maybe it was too long I did this, but the coffee suited me well. So I created a new life word that wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't read this manuscript that I constructed yesterday. That's an affordance. So you see, the life world, if you take it in parallel with James Gibson, is an act of need. What does your whole system want? Actually, I will take the liberty to cite Jan Eiskens. There is no free will, there's a free want. What does my whole system, soul and body included, even down to the fingernails, what do they need? They needed that sip of coffee, thereby creating a new life word, or having a different pilot wave. Thereby, we made a global reality even more global, because according to James Gibson, it wouldn't be reality if there is no need in it. It wouldn't be objective, because your need is an objective part of reality. The relation, as Carlo Rovelli would put it maybe. So just to keep it closely, Gibson would say anything that is doable serves a purpose, something I can manipulate either with my hands, my feet, my body, and my thinking capabilities. Do not forget that. I think we usually think that thinking itself is rather limited, that it's already predestined. Thinking is not a subject at any university except in Malta, thanks to Edward de Bono. I will stride into Edward de Bono a bit later. But thinking is important. James Gibson would agree with it, because a sort of meta-thinking, thinking about what sort of affordances or life worlds or pilot waves or collapses, if you like, sticking to the all view that we usually kept to in this YouTube channel. You have a real physical fact of the environment. And now we are really coming into some interesting area. Here I see behind me, or feel behind me, the force of Paul Feyerabend, who says all scientific progress is because it's doable and also useful in some sense. It's all connected to a direction, a purpose, going somewhere. Otherwise, it is simply not objective. You are cutting out an important part of reality. So, in extremely sharp contrast, what is happening within academia, where objectivity is cutting out the observer and eradicating yourself. Quantum mechanics and actually all these interpretations share that trait and would say no. Thereby, if you cut yourself out, you're making it completely subjective, because you're neglecting a really big piece of reality. Your will, your opinions is nothing subjective in a certain direction. It is actually part of the world. You can't take yourself out of the equation. I would say, and here I'm striding a bit into Edward de Bono, who says that the current thinking is too restricted. It's too predestined. It's too mechanistic. It is actually deterministic in this more pejorative sense, not in a good sense. Something that everybody agrees on, at least in a purple review or at a big institution or the sort of global village that some philosopher will put it. Marshall McLuhan, I think was the name of that. If you get your claim this way, then it's real. No, 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 no. It's a physical fact, says Adam Becker. Actually, affordances or the life world are physical facts. Those are the physical facts, not the Platonian object per se. So you see here how important this is and why academia is strangling itself by taking out the observer. And their view actually is wrong. And not only wrong, proven wrong. We know by mathematical and empirical result that taking out the objective, the observer, is actually wrong. It leads to false results. Isn't that incredible? So let's end with a sort of synthesis before I jump into Edward de Bono. You could say that the affordances, now it's getting a bit complicated, sorry. They are the pre-split branches of the Everetian universe. So what is an affordance? Well, I could jump to the right to see the bush. I can jump to the left to see the sunny roof. But before that, there is an affordance. And of course, affordances are very hard to pinpoint verbally, naturally, because they are real and physical. But tell me this, curiosity from my part. I am curious. I've been looking in the same way. Not that there's anything wrong at looking at you, Carl, it's a pleasure. But now I want to have a change. That's an affordance. My body and this location also afford that possibility. It makes it possible for an Everetian other world or a Bohmian other pilot wave. So it's a physical reality. My want and what's around me together, that makes up the quantum mechanistic objective reality, the physical scientific reality. So then when I choose, all the other worldviews collapses either and disappears, as we usually say, or they become other worlds which I can never visit, so it doesn't really matter. It amounts to the same thing. So what we do is we perceive the world as a set of things we can do. Without a doing, and now I'm exactly with the Paul Feyerabian viewpoint, without a doability, without the purpose, there is no science at all. It will just be mishmash and nothingness. And quantum mechanics, in some ways or others, I had 3 different ways here, suggested to a varying degree, but they all do it, actually ontologically realize them. So they become real in some way or another, even though some of the alternatives disappears. So we are half sharp making a border between ourselves and the all view. The all view is actually pure subjectivity. And it doesn't work either because there is no purpose. Paul Feyerabend would be ravenous almost, and in a rage say, what? There can be no science without a purpose. It doesn't make any sense and it doesn't work in reality. Look at CERN. They put in, I think, $100 billion in that project. And there is, I think, somewhere in between 3,000 to 6,000 people working there. They have a purpose. They don't do it to discover new particles somewhere. They do something that is useful, both for head, body, and what is surrounding us. It's actually evolving to an economical resource. So how does Edward de Bono comes into that? Well, in the beginning, I was really curious, how could this come into this? It does actually. Because lateral thinking is the acceptance of many worlds, or the pilot waves, or the collapsing of the alternative proposals in the superposition. Lateral thinking is the before. It's the act of creativity. It is actually somewhat breaking the classical logic of the Newtonian, in a bad way deterministic. I have a bad way deterministic feeling about the Newtonian mechanics. A preordained rationality is no rationality at all. A rationality we all agree on preemptively, anterior to the fact, it is always tainted by the very smell of lie. If I tell myself that something is in a certain way with no experience of it, we are making a huge mistake. It's maybe the biggest prejudice you can have. Edward de Bono focuses how our real head is working. And I think when he says, he has a very good example how consciousness need to make sense of things. This sense making is a very important trait of reality as itself, that is our minds and reality outside. But only keeping to that, only keeping to deterministic things, keeping to groups, subgroups, categories, definitions, that will lead to decaying thinking. A thinking that does not progress. The only way to progress is to be in the, so to speak, superposition. Kalle here is very fond of a meowing cat called the Schrödinger cat. It is before we open the lid to the cat. There we have the chances to be creative, because this is before I step to the left or to the right. Here we can create something new. If we are using the old concepts, the traditional classical thinking, this ingrained thinking, mechanistic in the worst sense, we will come to the same results as we did before. And this is also why AI so easily today can copy not technological evolution. They cannot make inventions, but what they can do is copy what they are doing at academia today. And now we're talking a computer that's not really advanced. Not advanced at all. It will be pretty advanced in 10 years. Something I discussed yesterday with a former Intel expert. But today it's not even advanced. It can already copy. That goes to show it is not advanced at all. It's not thinking. It's preordained rules. Something Edward de Bono says, the very opposite of thinking. Lateral thinking, creative thinking, connected actually to humor. You remember, Kalle, that he said a joke is often the very essence of creativity. The joke opens a new worldview because it changes my mind and thereby changes the world. Is that in a metaphorical sense or is it in a literal sense? And here we come to the very point of Adam Becker's book. It is real. That is the real reality. Sorry for the repetition there, but I really would like to enforce it. When you take lateral thinking into the concept, when you're being creative, then you can have a reality. The other thing, the representational thinking or the left hemisphere thinking, as they do in academia, is actually going the other way, unreal thinking. You are cutting off your connection to reality by not including lateral creative thinking. You need to do that. Otherwise, my choice going to the right will be preordained in my mind. And since this is the life world for everything around, my whole universe changes with me. This is why Everett is good here, because it enforces the idea it's the whole world. It's not just me in the world. It is my world. It's not even mine. It's a world. So it's objective. So very far from what they think in academia, that your want, your emotions are subjective and should be eradicated. Doing that destroys everything. Everything. What we need is humor. We need to laugh at the cat once more. We need to open up the doors to possibilities, and thereby we will also gain happiness. This is another very nice point of Edward de Bono, something he shares with James Gibson. Gibson also say, opening up the affordances will make your future more interesting. Interesting means that you will have a much wider scope of options, and you will engage your own thinking into your reality. It will not be a separate thing. I mean, that's about it. Kalle, maybe you have some questions here.
So thank you. It's always a pleasure to listen to you.
Oh, thanks for coming.
So how would you condense Adam Becker's philosophy in one sentence or two?
Yes, I can do that actually. I actually prepared for it. Thank you very much for the question. The very condensed way you can take Adam Becker is that your wants, what you want to do, is an integral part of reality. An objective, measurable.
So if I want the cat dead, it will be dead.
Yes, it will at least have an influence.
Interesting.
But do remember, Kalle, here, en brasklapp, as we say in Swedish, I don't know what that's called in English. It means that there is a clausule here. It doesn't mean that you have complete control of your mind, because your mind is a huge part of reality. But if you could, if you,
with Becker, subjectivity comes in with full force.
Yes, and especially how I enforce it here with bringing in James Gibson and Edward de Bono.
So in a university paper, you can now write, I want, and this I cannot say it's unscientific anymore.
It's the only scientific. Or taking it away as they do in academia actually makes for unscientific thinking.
Applauses.
Yes.
Great.
You say the university of the world, as now quoting Bono, are destroying knowledge. Actually destroying knowledge. Remember his article in The Guardian in the 90s, where he attacks the Gang of Three, Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates. He got so attacked. Of course, he used them as metaphor for this mechanistic thinking. He didn't actually he didn't attack them as personalities. But nothing in the history of The Guardian, at least in the 90s, had evolved into such criticism. So accusing, pointing to the elephant in the room is actually pointing to this unreal thinking, where you take the subjective, the want, your wishes, all that is you, Kalle, actually, away, that destroys everything. Condemn.
Thank you
very much.